The red dust of the Ijebu kingdom settled on Jadasola, Jones's designer heels, as she stepped out of Land Rover, surveying the sprawling diamond mine that would soon be hers. At 26, she was already being groomed to inherit Jones' mining empire, the largest diamond operation in southwestern Nigeria. The ancient baobab trees dotted the landscape like silent sentinels, their massive trunks bearing witness to generations of her family's prosperity. Her grandfather had discovered the first diamonds here in 1952, and now the Jones name was synonymous with wealth and power across West Africa. But as Jadasola watched the workers emerging from the earth covered in dust and sweat, a familiar unease stirred in her chest. The mines had made her family incredibly wealthy, but at what cost? The environmental reports she'd been reading painted a troubling picture of water contamination, soil depletion, and community displacement. Her father, Chief Babatunde Jones, dismissed her concerns as youthful idealism, but Jadasola couldn't shake the feeling that their empire was built on shaky foundations. Tomorrow, she would meet the new research assistant her father had hired to conduct a sustainability study, a mere formality, he assured her, to satisfy international investors. Little did she know that this meeting would change everything. Adewale Ogundipe adjusted his worn leather satchel and checked his watch for the third time as he waited in the reception area of Jones Mining Headquarters. At 28, he had spent the last 5 years of his life studying environmental engineering on scholarships, working multiple jobs to support his widowed mother and younger sisters in their small village of Iperu. This research position was a dream come true, a chance to apply his knowledge while earning enough money to finally lift his family out of poverty. He had prepared meticulously for this moment, knowing that his education was his only weapon against the circumstances of his birth. When Jadasola Jones walked into the conference room, Adewale's breath caught in his throat. She was not the spoiled socialite he had expected, but a woman whose intelligent eyes seemed to hold the same questions that kept him awake at night. Her handshake was firm, her questions about his research pointed and insightful. As she outlined her vision for sustainable mining practices, Adewale realized that perhaps the daughter of his employer was not his enemy, but a potential ally. Their conversation stretched well past the scheduled hour, both finding in the other a kindred spirit who understood that progress meant more than profit. Neither could have imagined that this first meeting was laying the foundation for a love that would challenge everything they thought they knew about duty, family, and sacrifice. 3 weeks into his employment, Adewale found himself looking forward to his daily briefings with Jadasola more than he cared to admit. They had established a routine of meeting beneath the largest baobab tree on the property, its shade providing relief from both the scorching sun and the watchful eyes of mine supervisors. Jadasola had surprised him by insisting on visiting every section of the operation, from the processing plants to the workers' quarters, asking questions that revealed a deep concern for the human cost of their prosperity. Her genuine horror at the living conditions of the miners' families had touched something in Adewale's heart that he had carefully guarded since childhood. Today, as they reviewed water quality reports showing dangerous levels of contamination in nearby streams, Adewale watched Jadasola's face crumple with dismay. "I had no idea it was this bad," she whispered, her perfectly manicured fingers tracing the alarming statistics. For the first time, Adewale saw past her designer clothes and expensive education to the woman beneath, someone who genuinely cared about making things right. When she asked him to help her understand not just the science but the human impact, he found himself sharing stories of his own village, of children who couldn't attend school because they spent their days walking miles for clean water. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, both realized they were no longer just employer and employee, but two souls united by a shared vision of justice. Against her father's explicit wishes, Jadasola insisted on accompanying Adewale to Iperu village to see firsthand how mining operations affected local communities. The 2-hour drive through increasingly rural landscapes was filled with nervous conversation, both acutely aware that they were crossing more than just geographical boundaries. When they arrived at Adewale's modest family compound, his mother Mama Beezy welcomed Jadasola with traditional Yoruba hospitality, offering her the best seat and serving her fresh palm wine despite clearly recognizing the expensive car and designer clothes. As they toured the village, Jadasola's world expanded beyond anything her privileged upbringing had prepared her for. She saw children studying by candlelight because there was no electricity, women walking miles to fetch water from wells that often ran dry during the harmattan season, and young men leaving for the cities because the land could no longer support them. Adewale's careful explanations of how mining runoff had affected local agriculture hit her like physical blows. When a group of village elders approached them with quiet dignity to request help with their failing crops, Jadasola felt the full weight of her family's responsibility. That evening, as she sat beside Adewale under a canopy of stars more brilliant than any diamond, she understood that her feelings for him were inseparable from her awakening conscience. The drive back to the mining compound was heavy with unspoken tension. Jadasola sat in the passenger seat, her usual confidence replaced by a vulnerability that made Adewale's chest tighten with protective instincts he had no right to feel. When she suddenly asked him to stop the car beside a grove of ancient baobabs, he complied without question. In the silvery moonlight, she turned to him with tears in her eyes and confessed that seeing his village had shattered her understanding of her own privilege. "How can I live with this knowledge?" she whispered, and Adewale found himself stepping closer, drawn by her pain and his own growing feelings. The kiss happened so naturally it felt inevitable, like the meeting of two rivers that had always been destined to converge. Under the baobab trees that had witnessed centuries of human joy and sorrow, Jadasola and Adewale finally acknowledged what had been building between them for weeks. But even as they held each other in the moonlight, both knew they were crossing a line that could destroy them both. Jadasola was engaged to Babatunde Akinola, son of a powerful Lagos politician, in an arrangement that would secure her family's political influence for generations. Adewale was a village boy whose family depended on him to lift them from poverty. Yet in that moment, beneath the ancient trees that had sheltered countless lovers before them, neither could bring themselves to care about anything but the perfect rightness of being in each other's arms. What began as stolen moments under the baobabs evolved into a carefully orchestrated series of secret meetings. Jadasola would create reasons to inspect remote sections of the mining operation, always requiring Adewale's technical expertise. They met in abandoned equipment sheds, empty conference rooms after hours, and hidden clearings in the bush where only the baobabs bore witness to their growing love. Each encounter deepened their connection, as they shared not just kisses but dreams, fears, and visions of a future that seemed impossibly out of reach. Adewale showed Jadasola research papers he had written in graduate school about revolutionary mining techniques that could restore damaged ecosystems while maintaining profitability. Jadasola shared her secret plans to transform the family business, revealing a mind that was both strategically brilliant and ethically driven. They spent hours designing hypothetical projects that could benefit both the company and local communities, their professional collaboration becoming indistinguishable from their personal intimacy. But as their love deepened, so did the danger of discovery. Jadasola's engagement to Babatunde was scheduled to be announced in 6 weeks, and her father had already begun making comments about her frequent field trips. Time was running out, and neither knew how to choose between love and loyalty without destroying innocent lives in the process. Chief Babatunde Jones summoned his daughter to his mahogany-paneled office, with its walls lined with mining awards and family portraits. The formal announcement, he declared with satisfaction, would take place at the end of the month during the annual Mining Consortium Gala. But Babatunde Akinola had proven himself a worthy match. His father's political connections would secure favorable legislation for their industry, while his Harvard MBA would bring fresh ideas to their expansion plans. As her father outlined the benefits of the union with characteristic business precision, Jadasola felt the walls of her gilded cage closing in around her. That evening, as she met Adewale beneath their favorite baobab, Jadasola's composure finally cracked. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing against his chest as she told him about the engagement announcement. Adewale held her tightly, his own heart breaking as he realized their time together was measured in days, not months. "We could run away," he whispered desperately, but both knew it was an impossible dream. His family depended on his income, and her disappearance would trigger a manhunt that would inevitably lead back to his village. As they clung to each other under the ancient tree, both understood that their love was a luxury neither could afford, yet neither could bring themselves to let go of the one thing that had ever made them feel truly alive. Kemi Adewale, Jadasola's childhood friend and now her personal secretary, had always been observant. She noticed the way Jadasola's eyes lit up when Adewale entered her room, the way she lingered in conversations with him, the subtle changes in her routine that always seemed to coincide with his schedule. When she followed Jadasola one evening and witnessed their passionate embrace beneath the baobab trees, Kemi faced her own impossible choice. Her loyalty to Jadasola was absolute, forged in childhood and strengthened by years of shared secrets, but her position in the Jones household depended entirely on the family's trust. Kemi spent sleepless nights wrestling with her conscience, knowing that her silence made her complicit in a deception that could destroy everyone she cared about. She had grown up in the same privileged circles as Jadasola and understood the brutal consequences of defying family expectations. Yet she had also seen the way love had transformed her friend from a dutiful daughter into a woman with fire in her eyes and purpose in her step. When Chief Jones began asking pointed questions about Jadasola's whereabouts during her unexplained absences, Kemi made her choice. She covered for a friend with carefully constructed alibis, buying them precious time while silently praying that love would find a way to triumph over tradition. But Batunde Akinola arrived at the Jones compound with all the fanfare befitting a political prince. Tall, handsome, and impeccably educated, he was everything Chief Jones could want in a son-in-law, charming with the elders, ambitious in his business discussions, and politically astute in his understanding of power dynamics. During the welcome dinner, he regaled the assembled guests with stories of his time at Harvard and his vision for modernizing Nigeria's mining industry through strategic partnerships with international investors. Jadasola sat beside him in an emerald green geli that matched her engagement ring, playing the part of the dutiful fiancée, while her heart ached for the man serving water to the guests. Adewale moved to the dining room like a ghost, his usual confidence replaced by a painful awareness of his place in this world. He watched Babatunde's hand rest possessively on Jadasola's shoulder and felt something die inside his chest. After the guests retired, Jadasola found him sitting alone under the baobab tree, staring up at the stars. "He is a good man," Adewale said quietly, not looking at her. "He can give you everything you deserve." But when Jadasola knelt beside him and took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes, she saw her own desperation reflected there. "I don't want everything," she whispered fiercely. "I only want you." In the distance, the lights of the compound twinkled like earthbound stars, a reminder of the world that would never accept their love. Working late in the laboratory, Adewale made the breakthrough he had been chasing for months. His sustainable extraction method could reduce environmental impact by 60% while actually increasing diamond yield through more precise targeting. The implications were revolutionary. Mining operations could become truly sustainable, creating prosperity for communities rather than destroying them. As he stared at the computer models proving his theory, he realized this could change everything. If he could convince Chief Jones to implement these methods, perhaps he could earn enough respect and influence to bridge the gap between himself and Jadasola. The next morning, Adewale presented his findings to a hastily assembled board meeting. Chief Jones listened with growing interest as the data revealed potential for massive cost savings and improved international reputation. Even Babatunde seemed impressed, asking technical questions that demonstrated his business acumen. But when Adewale proposed using his village as a pilot site for community partnership programs, the room fell silent. Chief Jones's eyes narrowed as he studied the young man before him, perhaps seeing him clearly for the first time. The approval for the research project came with conditions that made Adewale's blood run cold. He would supervise the implementation, but from Lagos, not from the field. It was a promotion that felt like exile, removing him from both Jadasola and the communities he hoped to help. Chief Jones had not built an empire by ignoring threats to his carefully laid plans. He summoned Adewale to his office on a sweltering afternoon, the air conditioning humming ominously as the older man studied files spread across his massive desk. Without preamble, he laid out photographs taken by a security team, images of Jadasola and Adewale embracing, talking intimately, sharing moments that could only be interpreted one way. The silence stretched between them like a chasm, as Adewale realized his world was crumbling around him. "You are a bright young man with a promising future," Chief Jones said finally, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "But you have forgotten your place. The ultimatum was delivered with business-like precision. Adewale would accept a transfer to Lagos office immediately and cease all personal contact with Jadasola, or Jones Mining would withdraw its water rights agreement with Iperu Village. The implications hit Adewale like a physical blow. Without access to the mining company's deep wells, his village would face drought and eventual abandonment. Thousands of people, including his own family, would suffer for his selfishness. As he looked into Chief Jones's cold eyes, Adewale understood that love was a luxury he had never been able to afford. He accepted the transfer without another word, knowing he was signing away his heart to save his people. Lagos felt like a concrete prison after the open skies of Ijebu Kingdom. Adewale threw himself into his work with desperate intensity, redesigning mining protocols from a sterile office tower, while his heart remained buried beneath the baobabs. His revolutionary techniques were being implemented across 3 countries, bringing him professional recognition and a salary that finally allowed him to send substantial money home. Yet every success fell hollow, without Jadasola to share it with. His colleagues praised his dedication, not knowing that work was the only thing standing between him and complete despair. Meanwhile, Jadasola moved through her engagement preparations like a sleepwalker. The wedding plans accelerated with military precision, dress fittings, menu tastings, guest lists that read like a who's who of Nigerian high society. But Batunde was unfailingly kind and respectful, bringing her flowers and discussing their future with genuine enthusiasm. He spoke of their honeymoon in Dubai, their future children, the life they would build together combining their family's influence. Jadasola smiled and nodded at appropriate moments, but her heart remained in Ijebu, wondering if Adewale was thinking of her beneath their baobab tree. The engagement ring felt like a shackle on her finger, beautiful and suffocating in equal measure. The fitting room at Lagos's most exclusive bridal boutique buzzed with activity as seamstresses pinned and adjusted the imported silk gown that would make Jadasola one of the most photographed brides in Nigeria. Her mother, Folashe Jones, supervised every detail with the intensity of a military campaign, ensuring that her daughter's wedding would cement their family's social standing for generations. The dress was a masterpiece of French craftsmanship, worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. It felt like a burial shroud as Jadasola stood motionless, while strangers transformed her into someone else's vision perfection. Kemi stood nearby, her face carefully neutral as she watched her friend disappear behind layers of silk and tradition. When they were finally alone, Jadasola caught a reflection in the full-length mirror and saw a beautiful stranger staring back at her. "Do you think he's forgotten me already?" she asked quietly, not needing to specify whom she meant. Kemi's heart ached for her friend, but she could only offer the truth they both knew, that forgetting was probably Adewale's only path to survival. As Jadasola stood in her wedding gown, surrounded by symbols of wealth and status, she had never felt poorer or more alone. The woman in the mirror would marry Babatunde in 6 weeks, but some essential part of her would remain forever beneath the baobab trees, waiting for a love that could never be. Late at night in his Lagos apartment, Adewale stared at the mining reports that had arrived in his secure email. Something was wrong with the water treatment systems at 3 different sites, and the contamination levels were spiking dangerously. His sustainable protocols were being deliberately undermined, the equipment malfunctioning in ways that suggested sabotage rather than mechanical failure. When he called the site managers, their evasive answers confirmed his worst fears. Someone wanted his methods to fail, and they were willing to poison communities to prove their point. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. This was connected to his relationship with Jadasola. By discrediting his work, her father could justify removing him permanently while demonstrating the futility of challenging established methods. Innocent villages were being poisoned to send a message about the consequences of overreaching. Adewale spent the night in his office, using his security clearance to access files that revealed the scope of the sabotage. The evidence was damning, but carefully constructed to be legally deniable. As dawn broke over Lagos' skyline, he made a decision that would change everything. He would return to Ijebu, confront Chief Jones with the evidence, and accept whatever consequences followed. Some things mattered more than safety, and the lives of innocent people and his own integrity were among them. Adewale's unexpected return to the Ijebu compound sent ripples of tension through the carefully orchestrated wedding preparations. He arrived during the evening shift change, using his still valid security credentials to access the mining offices where he uploaded his evidence to every computer system on the network. The sabotage reports, the falsified environmental data, the deliberate contamination of village water supplies, everything was now part of the permanent record. He knew Chief Jones would discover the breach within hours, but he needed time for one final conversation with the man who had taught him that love and justice sometimes require the ultimate sacrifice. When Chief Jones found him in the data center, surrounded by the humming servers that contained his damning evidence, the older man's fury was terrifying to behold. But Adewale stood his ground, no longer the grateful scholarship boy, but a man who had found his own power. "The international investors will see these reports tomorrow," he said quietly. "They'll know what you've done to protect your daughter's engagement." The standoff stretched between them like a live wire, two men from different worlds finally understanding each other perfectly. Chief Jones could destroy Adewale's career, his family, his future, but Adewale could destroy something far more valuable: the Jones family's carefully cultivated reputation. It was mutually assured destruction, and both men knew that only one would walk away from this confrontation intact. The showdown between father and lover took place in Chief Jones's office as the first light of dawn painted the sky gold over the baobab trees. Jadasola arrived to find them locked in a battle of wills that would determine not just her future, but the fate of thousands of people whose lives hung in the balance. Her father's face was carved from stone as he outlined the choice before them all. Adewale would disappear forever, his research would be buried, and the wedding would proceed as planned. In return, the village water rights will be preserved and no further accidents will befall the environmental protection systems. But Jadasola had spent sleepless nights preparing for this moment. She placed her engagement ring on her father's desk with steady hands and looked between the two men who represented the warring halves of her soul. "There is another way," she said, her voice carrying the authority of her bloodline and conviction of her love. She had spent weeks consulting with international lawyers, environmental groups, and investment firms. Her proposal was audacious. Transform Jones Mining into Africa's first truly sustainable diamond operation, with Adewale as Chief Environmental Officer and herself as CEO. The financial projections she presented showed higher long-term profits, enhanced international reputation, and genuine community partnerships. It was a vision that could revolutionize the entire industry, but it required her father to surrender control and trust his daughter's judgment over generations of traditional practices. Chief Jones's response came not in words, but in action. Within hours of Jadasola's proposal, armed security guards surrounded Adewale's village, ostensibly to protect Jones' mining interests, but effectively cutting off all access to the community wells. The message was clear: defiance would be met with collective punishment. Mama Beezy called her son in tears, describing how families were already rationing water, while children asked why the nice people who had helped them before were now causing their suffering. The weight of his people's fate crushed Adewale's spirit more effectively than any personal threat could have. Jadasola watched her father orchestrate this cruelty with the same efficiency he brought to board meetings, and felt something fundamental break inside her. This was a man who had taught her to ride horses, who had proudly displayed her school achievements, who claimed to love her above all else. Yet he was willing to torture innocent people to force her compliance. When Babatunde arrived for dinner and expressed mild concern about the security situation while discussing their honeymoon plans, Jadasola realized she was trapped in a world where human suffering was merely a negotiating tactic. That night, she stood at her bedroom window looking out at the baobab grove and made a decision that would either save them all or destroy everything she had ever known. Kemi found Jadasola burning papers in her fireplace at 3 a.m, her face illuminated by flames that seemed to dance with determination rather than desperation. The documents included Swiss bank account numbers, property deeds, and most importantly, detailed records of her father's business practices that even his lawyers didn't know existed. "My grandmother left me more than jewelry," Jadasola explained, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was planning. "She left me insurance against the men in our family. The offshore accounts contain enough money to fund a new life, while the business records contain enough evidence to protect them from pursuit." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would disappear during the wedding ceremony itself, when security would be focused on protecting VIP guests rather than monitoring family members. Kemi would drive the getaway car, while Adewale waited at a predetermined location with forged travel documents. They would cross into Benin, then fly to Canada, where Jadasola had already secured refugee status based on the evidence of her father's crimes. It was a plan that required perfect timing, absolute trust, and the willingness to sacrifice everything they had ever known for an uncertain future. As dawn approached, the three conspirators sealed their pact with the knowledge that failure would mean not just heartbreak, but imprisonment or worse for them all. The Jones compound had been transformed into a fairy tale, setting worthy of its status as the social event of the year. Hundreds of guests arrived in luxury cars, their traditional agbada and geli creating a tapestry of color beneath white tents that shielded them from the harsh African sun. The baobab trees had been decorated with thousands of white lights, their ancient trunks now serving as pillars for a celebration that represented everything Jadasola had once believed she wanted. International news crews captured every moment, broadcasting the union of two of Nigeria's most powerful families to audiences across 3 continents. In the bridal suite, Jadasola submitted to final preparations with the serene calm of someone who had already said goodbye to her old life. Her mother fussed with the train of her gown while praising Babatunde's thoughtfulness in sending white orchids at morning. Jadasola's responses were appropriate but automatic. Her mind focused on the small bag hidden behind her closet that contained everything she would need for her new life. When the call came that it was time to walk down the aisle, she embraced her mother with genuine love, knowing it might be the last time they would ever touch. As she made her way toward the altar where Babatunde waited with a smile of genuine affection, Jadasola felt like she was walking through a beautiful dream that belonged to someone else entirely. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly until the moment when the officiant asked if anyone had objections to the union. In the heartbeat of silence that followed, Jadasola's eyes found Adewale standing among the service staff, his face a mask of noble resignation. She saw in his expression the same decision she had made, that love without freedom was no love at all, and that some cages were too beautiful to break from inside. What happened next shocked even those who thought they knew her well. Jadasola stepped back on the altar, removed her grandmother's pearls and placed them in Babatunde's hands, and spoke words that would echo through Nigerian society for years to come. "I cannot marry a good man while my heart belongs to a better one." The chaos that followed was immediate and total. Chief Jones's roar of fury competed with gasps from the assembled guests, while photographers captured the moment that would define scandal for a generation. But Jadasola was already moving, her wedding dress billowing behind her as she ran toward Adewale through a sea of shocked faces. He caught her in his arms as camera flashes exploded around them, lifting her off her feet in a kiss that tasted of freedom and defiance. Together, they ran toward the baobab grove where Kemi waited with the car, their laughter echoing off the ancient trees that had blessed countless love stories before theirs. Behind them, 2 empires trembled, but ahead lay a horizon unlimited by anything except their courage to write their own story. Under the baobabs that had sheltered their love from the beginning, Jadasola and Adewale chose each other over everything else, proving that some love stories are worth any price, even paradise itself.